Hey everybody, this is James at TeaDB.org bringing you another Inbetweenisode. So today it's going to be a normal drinking Inbetweenisode. We're going to be drinking a tea that I own quite a lot of. So I own a Tong +1 cake of this tea, and that tea is the Xiaguan Love Forever paper Tong tea. So some of you that have been following for a while know that we brought this tea onto a normal episode with Denny and I 2 years ago. This tea was not purchased by me, but was given as a wedding gift when I got married a couple of years ago in 2017. So thank you to those people again. Extremely generous of you. And I had previously tasted the tea before they gave it to me on my wedding, and it's a tea I like, and the tea has recently, in the past few months or so, has been started to be sold by some friends of mine that run Teas We Like. So thought I would bring this on to just sort of drink through it on my own. The last episode was with Denny, and tell you guys my current thoughts on the tea. And it just because it is now available. Previously it was not available, at least not easily, in the West. So excited to do that. So before we get started on the actual drinking, this tea is actually a little confusing. So there are two versions of this tea, and they actually have the same wrapper, at least to my understanding. But one comes in a paper tong and one comes in a bamboo tong. And, supposedly there is a pretty big quality difference in both of the teas. And I've actually tasted them, and I think I generally agree with the consensus. I didn't do a super thorough tasting or anything like that, but I did have them head to head, and I did prefer the paper tong version. I did this a while ago, so I no longer have the sample of the bamboo version. So for those of you that are considering getting this tea or anything like that, definitely look into that and make sure you know which one you're buying before you do, because I've seen at least one review that ended up buying the bamboo version and they just didn't care for it. So I don't know if they would have felt differently if they bought the paper one, but you always need to take that sort of thing into consideration, especially for some of these teas where there's a lot of different productions of something. There's only two for this tea, so it's a little simpler, but sometimes there can be a pretty big quality difference within the same year, production to production. So generally agree with that consensus. And the other confusing thing about this is tea is a 2013 tea, and it says 2013 right on the wrapper, as you probably saw from the beginning. But the material is aged. So those of you not familiar with the Pu'erh conventions, they will usually put the age of the tea as in the time it was compressed. So a lot of these big factories will have material that is from previous years, and they'll blend it into the cakes. Now in the case of this one, it makes a big difference because the material is supposedly, at least some of the material is supposedly leftover 2003 material from Banjiang. So you should always take those things with a grain of salt. Maybe it's 50%, maybe it's 20%, maybe it's 5%. Those things make quite a big difference. But the pedigree of this tea and the reputation of this tea, a lot of it lies with sort of the aged material, and it tastes aged too. This does not look like a 2013 tea. It looks much closer to a 2003 tea. Alright, so that's a lot of talking. Teas We Like does sell the paper tong version. I know King Tea Mall also sells something. I suspect it's the bamboo version, but I'm not totally sure. So let's get to this tea. This is steep number 3 or 4, and for me this tea is pretty compressed, as a lot of factory teas are, and so sometimes it can take a little bit to get going, and you can see from this they are, and if I remember the episode with Denny, the tea brewed pretty yellowish orange for a bit, so I think got some particularly compressed bits here. So before this tea gets too cooled down, let's drink. So this tea is really not very sweet at all on the initial, just right when the liquid is hitting your tongue. The first couple were a little bit. This one, you can taste the fruits, you can taste the wood. It's a really, really burly, really, really dense, and pretty pungent, resinousy as well. Not too floral, at least not in any sort of high note sort of way here. A lot of wood and a lot of sort of like more overly ripe fruits, maybe like starting to get into sort of more of the rotten fermented type of fruit too. So pretty dark aroma coming off of there. So really strong, quite definitely. There's some. It's a little bitter, but I'd say it's mainly sort of astringency. For this tea, you really gotta pay attention to see when that sweetness sort of comes. So it's definitely not initially sweet, and in fact, I can sort of feel like a mouth drying aspect to it from the astringency. But it's the sort of productive astringency that you really want, that doesn't just totally dry you out, but usually comes with more sweetness later. So don't just keep chugging the tea. Pay attention to how how the tea tastes 10 seconds, 20 seconds, a minute after. And so now I'm starting to get more of that sweetness sort of lingering in the throat, the back of the mouth. It's still, the astringency is still certainly part of the experience, but I think if it didn't have this sort of like aftertaste that comes, I think it'd be a lot more difficult to enjoy. Cheers, guys. So, almost a little creamy. The body and the texture of it is really thick. So despite this wrapper, which kind of looks a little, I don't know, I'm not even sure how to describe it, but you wouldn't describe it as a burly wrapper. This looks more like a cheesy Valentine's wrapper. It's not something that I would personally consider aesthetically pleasing, but it's kind of, it's a little goofy and a little cheesy. But the tea is definitely does not taste like you would assume from the wrapper. It tastes strong. It's a very strong tea. And in fact, this is definitely not the sort of tea that you would serve. It would not be a tea that passes the mom test particularly well. I have a couple friends that I do tend to drink this tea with, and they are the friends that really, really, really like the stronger teas. Also not a tea that you're going to want to open a session with. It's just so strong that, especially if you're trying to do a little subtler and a little more elegant tea after this, I think it's just kind of difficult for you to even taste it. Also not a tea you want on an empty stomach. So despite being theoretically at least 16 years old, this material, it's definitely one that can benefit from further aging as well. That steep, I'd say, was slightly weaker, pretty similar overall. Just a really dense, woody, thick mouthfeel, good texture going on with it. So one thing I've been making sure I do correctly is making sure I really have boiling water, so you can see the steam starting to come out of there. I just want to make sure we are brewing these teas to the maximum potential. I am using around 6 grams for a 90 milliliter Yixing pot here. So the color is just about starting to let up, so I think maybe in the next infusion I'll go for just a little longer, but still a very orange red color. So definitely not a 2013 tea. So I think some people might just skip over this tea saying, oh, it's Xiaguan, it's 2013. But definitely more for those that like aged and particularly strong teas. I was going to also say that it's not really a typical Xiaguan either. This is a special production. So this is not like if you've tried a Xiaguan tool and you're like, I'm not sure about this. You should note that this is pretty different from your typical Xiaguan. They're both strong. I would say I don't get any particularly amount of smoke in this. It can be a little resinous sometimes, but not smoky, not in the same way that Xiaguan can be. Interestingly, a little higher notes coming off of it, more florals and stuff like that. It's also a little hotter, so because I just hit it with water. Cheers, y'all. One thing I'm really picking up on this session and really enjoying is the texture of it. And texture for raw pu'erh, it's maybe something I really notice probably less than half of the time. But this is a really textured brew to it. It almost reminds me a little bit of some white teas and black teas. It's sort of like a silky finish to it. So it's kind of interesting. Still just really strong, really woody. Yeah. So, and this time the sweetness is coming a little bit quicker than that third steep here. It's definitely one that I enjoy. So those of you that have often asked what are teas that you would buy or you'd recommend. So I bought a cake of this last year, mainly so I didn't have to open my Tong. But it's a tea I enjoy. It's a tea I've drank at least 6 or 7 times in the past couple months, so that's about as often as I'll drink any tea, as you can imagine. I have a lot of teas lying around. It's a tea that really, I don't know, I think it's a good sort of litmus test for seeing how much you like these sort of factory style teas that are really strong but can be rewarding in sort of different aspects. One thing I've noted in just about every single session with this tea is that the aftertaste and sort of like the Xiaguan really is quite good for this tea when I've had it. Yeah, so I think that just about concludes this episode. For this tea, I give it currently in my enjoyability rating a 6.3. I think this tea is solid. I enjoy drinking it. For me personally, I do tend to drink something like the Zhangcha Huangyin a little bit more. That tea for me, this tea can be a little bit strong for me on an everyday basis, but I do I like both teas. I think this tea has more just sort of fuel in it that could potentially make it better in the long run. So I think that's about sums up my assessment of this tea. So that rating, according to Marco's rating system, is it has a special something, a positive attribute that stands out and impresses. If you were to translate that to a letter score, it's a B. So good brew. I enjoy the sessions. I need to be careful I don't overdo it with this tea. So yeah, thank you all for tuning in, and let me know if you have tried this tea, and I'll see you all next time. Cheers.